Guys, we're here. No Way Home comes out tomorrow, guys. This is happening. It's here. After a year and a half of speculation for this movie, we are about to feast our eyes on this magnificent beast. And who would have thought that the way that this movie ended was going to follow up with what we're about to see on Thursday? But before we start talking about the end of this movie, we've got a lot more movie to cover because the movie that we are talking about today, you saw the thumbnail, you read the title. It's Spider-Man Far From Home. When this movie first came out, my energy and my hype for it was just off the charts. I could not get enough of Spider-Man Far From Home. Since that time, since I saw it back in 2019, I've mellowed out a little bit on the movie. I'll get into that throughout this review. But the first thing I really noticed about Far From Home watching it back this time is that it's not really a follow-up to Spider-Man Homecoming. So much happened in between Spider-Man Homecoming and Far From Home, with Spider-Man going off to space in Infinity War, getting dusted along with half of the human population, only to be brought back in Avengers Endgame 5 years later in the future. Witness the death of Tony Starr and coming back into a world where half of the population has aged 5 years and half of them are 5 years behind where they should be. And it's because of this movie being more of a follow-up to Avengers Endgame than it is to Spider-Man Homecoming that the script for this movie isn't as tight as Homecoming. Peter has to deal with a lot more in this movie, and the film doesn't always dedicate enough time to it. The world has changed, and they're looking for a new Iron Man, and Peter's starting to feel really overwhelmed with the pressure of being the next Iron Man, that when it's time for his class to go on vacation to Europe, he doesn't want to do any of the superhero battle. He leaves his costume at home, and he just wants to have a good old time with his class and the girl that he has a crush on with MJ. But things don't go Peter's way when Nick Fury shows up and recruits him to help with all of these monsters showing up that they call the Elementals. And they get this information from a self-professed multiverse being known as Mysterio, played by Jake Gyllenhaal. And switching it up just a little bit, let's talk about the villain of this movie first. I went in, as I'm sure many of you did, with the foreknowledge of knowing that Mysterio was a villain of Spider-Man's. But Far From Home does a really good job of setting up that twist for an audience that doesn't know what's about to happen. Because with the loss of Tony Stark, Peter's feeling really vulnerable. So Mysterio comes along and kind of befriends Peter and takes him under his wing and becomes his new mentor in a way, someone that Peter really looks up to. And the way they play up Mysterio in this movie, they make him come across as a really likable guy. You actually get behind and kind of root for Mysterio at the beginning of this movie. Even if you feel like something's a little off with him, you can't help but root for the relationship going on between Mysterio and Peter in this movie. Jake Gyllenhaal and Tom Holland have such a rapport with each other. There's a scene on the rooftop when Mysterio is comforting Peter after he just got chewed out and called out and embarrassed by Nick Fury. They build a really endearing relationship between Mysterio and Spider-Man that when it becomes revealed that Mysterio is a bad guy, you feel the betrayal that Peter is feeling in the moment. I remember I saw this movie with a friend who didn't know that Mysterio was a bad guy from the comics, and when the room started to disappear of all the illusions, he looked at me and was like, what the heck is going on? And it was really cool to experience that viewing secondhand from him as someone who wasn't able to have that himself. And going on to Tom Holland's Peter Parker, I think Tom Holland's performance in Spider-Man Far From Home is one of his best performances he's ever given in the MCU. Peter is going through a lot in this movie, understandably so. He went through a lot in Infinity War and Endgame, so when he just wants to kind of go and hang out with his friends and try to get together with the girl he has a crush on in Michelle Jones, played by Zendaya, we'll talk about her in a minute, you can understand where he's coming from because you can relate to Peter. You can tell that he's exhausted, he's tired, he just wants to be a kid. I don't see this as him ditching his great power with great responsibility because he is a kid. And that's the thing about Tom Holland's Peter is he does feel so human. He feels more complex. He's not just so black and white. He does go through a number of different emotions and feelings. And he has his selfish reasons that are so relatable because what's more relatable than having a crush in high school? And that's where Zendaya comes in as this universe's MJ. And of all the characters in Far From Home, Zendaya is the one who gets the most upgrade. I didn't even bother mentioning Zendaya in my Homecoming review because I honestly don't like Zendaya's character in Homecoming. She only pops up in a couple scenes and she's there to be like a comic relief of this depressing character that just comes in and brings the mood down all the time, but she's not really a significant character in Homecoming. If you cut her out of Homecoming, the movie doesn't change. But with Far From Home, they knew that they had a great actor in Zendaya, and they actually serviced her a lot more in this movie. Because now out of nowhere, Peter has a crush on MJ, and he wants nothing more but to kiss her on top of the Eiffel Tower. And the relationship between MJ and Tom Holland in this movie is one of my favorite aspects of this movie because of the way that it's played. Like many people, I had a giant crush on a girl in high school. And when I watched Far From Home for the first time, and I saw how Peter was acting towards MJ, clicked right away. I was in it with Peter because I was Peter. I have never seen more of myself in a character in a film than watching Peter trying to interact with MJ.
Night.
Night. You look nice.
The way that Jon Watts directs the scenes and the way that Tom Holland and Zendaya play them, they completely capture what it's like to be an awkward teenage boy with a crush on a girl in high school. Zendaya and Tom are so cute in these scenes that while they don't really rival Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield in the Amazing Spider-Man film, they are my second favorite romantic couple that we've had in any Spider-Man movie. And if you had told me that that was going to be the case with Zendaya in Homecoming when it came out, I would have been like, yeah, right, try again next time. But they give a lot more to Michelle Jones in this movie. She's a lot more likable to me in this movie. Zendaya's performance is much better. They give her a lot more to do. And you actually find out a little bit more about the character, why she is the way she is, why she always has to feel like she has to bring the mood down and be depressing around everybody. And that's a huge congrats to Zendaya and the filmmakers behind this movie, because they took a character that I really didn't like in the first movie and made them a character I actually really enjoy. While I do love the high school crush stuff in Far From Home, I will admit that the first hour of this movie does kind of get hurt by it just a bit, because the first hour of this movie really does kind of play as a kind of generic teen movie to me. There's a lot of humor in the first half of this film that doesn't really work for me either. Like the scene where Peter's meeting with an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. and she's given him his new stealth suit and she asks him to strip down right in front of her, even though there's clearly another room behind him where he could just go and get changed in. She forces him to take off his pants, and then Brad comes in, who also has a crush on MJ, who Peter's kind of rivaling with. And he takes a picture of Tom Holland with his pants down next to this Russian girl. It's just a joke that's always felt out of place for me in a Spider-Man film. But after this first hour of the movie is over and Mysterio has revealed himself to be the villain after his huge, gigantic exposition dump on the audience, as he congratulates his teammates on pulling it off.
To the man who brought us all together, our former boss, Tony Stark. Whoa! To Tony!
The second hour of this movie is some of the most fun I have in a Spider-Man film. It's just balls to the wall Spidey action, and Jon Watts helms the action scenes in Spider-Man Far From Home so much better than in Homecoming. They're bigger scenes, they're more elaborate, and they're much more exciting. And the way that they incorporate Mysterio's illusions into the fight scenes, I don't think it could have been done any better. I mean, you do have to suspend your disbelief quite a bit on where Mysterio had time to program, choreograph, direct, and get these illusions projected in time to have this battle with Peter. But the visual effects and creative artistry that goes into the illusions is so brilliant, it's so entertaining to watch. It's almost trippy at times. And I've just always found the Spider-Man action done in the second half of this movie so much better than any of the action done in Homecoming. My only huge big complaint of Spider-Man Far From Home is the way that they end it, because this is the one post-credit scene in any Marvel movie that should not be a post-credit scene. Because if you're watching Far From Home and you see Spider-Man finally get his spider sense, he takes down Mysterio, he goes home with MJ, and this Spider-Man finally gets his big swing through New York City as he picks up MJ and they go on a swing together, and it's a very nice, warm, happy ending as the Spider-Man Far From Home credits come on. But then after the title card is over and we get all the names of the cast, if you didn't stay in the theater at that time, and some people, believe it or not, didn't stay in my theater. My wife just the other day when we watched this said that she didn't stay for this in the theater, and she was mind blown when it came up. Because this post-credit scene fundamentally changes how you view the end of this movie. When Spider-Man lands in Times Square and J.K. Simmons, J. Jonah Jameson from the Raimi films appears on screen, I will tell you straight up, when that happened in the theater, I was freaking out. My little T-Rex arms were going like this in the theater, and I was shaking out, "It's J.K. Simmons! It's J.K. Simmons!" And it's revealed that Mysterio uploaded and manipulated footage of his final battle with Spider-Man, making it look like Spider-Man is the one who executed the attack on London with all of the Stark drones. And to end it off with the kicker, he then reveals to the world that Spider-Man's name is Peter Parker. And then the movie ends. See you in 2 years. Which is now this Thursday. Spider-Man Far From Home isn't as perfect of a film as I thought it was back in 2019. The first hour does kind of drag a little bit. It has some pacing issues. It does have some comedy and some teenage tropes that you will find in like Disney Channel shows. But I still really enjoy the second half of this movie. When that Spider-Man action gets going, it just gets my blood pumping. Tom Holland, I think, is better in the role in this movie than he was in Homecoming, just because he's grown so much in it over the past few movies. Zendaya is so much better used. Michelle Jones is much better serviced. The action is better. Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio gives a very entertaining and at times intimidating performance.
The chance of getting hit is...
Fire all the drones now!
While the script may not be as tight as Homecoming, I do find this film more entertaining than its predecessor. And for that reason, while I won't give a strong recommend to Far From Home, even though I like it more than Homecoming, I will give Far From Home a very confident, solid recommend. But what do you guys think of Spider-Man Far From Home? Comment down below, let me know. I want to know all your thoughts and opinions about this movie. And guys, that is it. There is no more live-action Spider-Man movies to talk about. I wish I had time for Into the Spider-Verse, but Spider-Man No Way Home comes out tomorrow. It's been a long journey to get here, guys, and thank you so much for joining me for these Spider-Man reviews leading up to No Way Home. And I can't believe I got to say this, but the next Spider-Man movie that we're going to be talking about is Spider-Man No Way Home. Until then, guys, thank you so much for clicking on this video and checking out my channel. If you like talking movies, TV, and all things entertainment, why don't you go on and click that subscribe button, click that like button, click that notification bell, all that YouTube stuff. And I hope to talk to you guys again real soon.